Most people think buying a dental practice is just about cash flow, patient volume, and equipment. But what if I told you the real risk lies in the seller and the story they're not telling you? In today's episode, we unpack how one of our members almost got burned buying a perfect practice until a simple question during a seller call revealed a silent time bomb buried in the lease, the staff, and the growth story. Eric Gall spent over 25 years learning these lessons the hard way. This episode will challenge that thinking and give you a smarter playbook for negotiating and vetting any healthcare deal.
From a dental standpoint, there's tons of baby boomer dentists out there. And you get into that group of, 30 and 40 somethings and even the 50 somethings right now, and they love being employees. There's kind of an interesting dynamic in the dentistry world that kind of mirrors itself throughout all the acquisition world. And that is, thanks for having me, Jay. It's kind of a long story, but I was working in Ford Motor Company for 17 years. And while I was at Ford, part of my last set of roles and responsibilities before I left was doing post-merger integration of Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo, Ford, and Mazda. So, in that I got a taste of deal making when they brought me a bunch of businesses that they wanted to sell. It was right after the internet bubble back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And they said, hey, we bought all these businesses. What do we do with them? We don't want them anymore. So they developed a small group just to kind of build up information on those businesses and then take them back to market to sell them off to either private equity groups, high net worth individuals, et cetera, et cetera.
That's an interesting. Let me pause you this. That's an interesting story because it's, these are huge acquisitions that Ford did. And
well, I wasn't taking those. It was more stuff that was on the, I would call it the lower middle market end.
Sure.
It was like a 40 bay garage in Houston, Texas that they purchased, where the owner decided it was a great idea to put cameras in each of the bays so that if you wanted to log in remotely and watch your car being worked on, you could do it. So, Ford's take on that was that, oh, this is some interesting technology for, folks. So, they may want to watch their cars get worked on. And what we found out is that nobody wanted to watch their cars get worked on. So we had a 40 car garage we didn't need and needed to, sell that off.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're not only buying like car manufacturers, they're also buying these like random services and random technologies that are out there. They're being tested.
Well, I can't speak to what they're doing now, but back then, the internet, right before the internet bubble, all these little tiny internet businesses that intrigued them, they went out and purchased because they were flush with cash in the late 90s. And then obviously in the early 2000s, they weren't. So they had all these, acquisitions that were really not benefiting them at all. So, the question posed to me was like, how do we get rid of these so we don't have this burden, right?
Interesting. So obviously in that for the bay door one, it's not something that's directly detrimental to the business, but like these larger ones, like, aside from you being involved in them, I'm just, if you have an opinion about why, if you think of one large acquisition, what was the intent going into that acquisition and why it didn't work out? Just pick one of the large ones that you know more details about.
Yeah, well, let's stick on that one because I know the most about it.
Yeah.
It was most intriguing to me because it was probably the most laughable one of them all.
Yeah.
But the idea going in was that, Ford could take the technology that this guy developed, and the camera systems and everything else, and then the ability to access those via internet and put them into, their service bays and all their dealerships. So, if you dropped your vehicle off, like, by me, I was actually at Coconut Point Ford this morning getting an oil change, and if I wanted to watch my vehicle being serviced or worked on, you could log into, let's say, the Coconut Point Ford website.
Yeah.
And say, hey, what are they doing to my vehicle right now? And it took a long time today, so it was a slow process. So it would have been like watching, grass grow.
Yeah.
But that was the intent, behind it is that, hey, this might be something that people, would want to see, now that, we've got all this great internet access and everybody has internet access now, welcome back to the 90s, right?
Yeah.
It just didn't pan out. There's
Well, I think, and from that perspective, I think the consumer, like, well, technically the Ford Motors customer is really not the end consumer. It's usually the dealership. And if the end consumer maybe like the technology, want to see their car worked on, the dealership doesn't, because now you're just going to be frustrated with dealership with the car just sitting on the lot, not moving, not being worked on for like 6 hours. And so when you actually see it, you suspect it. We all suspect it. Like we avoid taking our cars to a dealership because it takes so long. And we like going to the quick, Jiffy Lube or whatever, because you're like, you stay in your car and they work on it and you leave. And I think if they put a camera in the dealership, it'll just be more frustrating for all their customers watching.
It could be. I mean, I just think at the end of the day, there's just no demand for it. I mean, people have better things to do.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah. So how did you end up getting rid of it? What did you end up doing?
Well, what I did is I sat down with private equity groups, a couple out of the Ann Arbor area. I just called them up and said, hey, how do you package a business for sale? Sat down and asked them what they were looking for. And they said, okay, here's all the information we need. So I went back to, those businesses that I was tasked to sell. And I said, hey, here's the information I need. And then, packaged it up and made it look, somewhat professional. And then, started picking up the phone and calling private equity groups. Back then, it was pick up the phone more than anything else and chat with them until you could find a buyer. And that ended up, and you could still back at that time, advertise it in newspapers and trade journals and things of that nature too. So, Ford's got a pretty big budget, so it was pretty easy.
Did you end up selling?
Yeah, we ended up selling it actually to an individual. So it was a high individual who purchased it, and welded it back into his automotive, suite of automotive businesses.
Nice. Okay. And how long did it take to sell?
Probably about 5-6 months.
Oh, that's not bad. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not that long. Okay. So after Ford Motors, what did you do?
Have a motivated seller.
Yes.
That's just willing to, take pretty much any offer that's put up to them. Then it's, a lot easier to make that deal.
Makes sense. So I'm assuming they didn't make any money on that deal. They just
no, they certainly
lost money. Yeah. Okay. And then so what did you do next after Ford?
Well, I left and pooled my money together with some other investors, and we purchased some automotive service companies. Then we went and bought a logistics company and a logistics software company. And then before it became really popular, we bought it was a franchising model for a last mile delivery company. And of course, then the downturn hit. And then my investor friends started scattering back into the corporate world. And I kind of liked playing the game of buying and selling businesses. And I'm like, boy, it'd be a whole lot easier if I didn't have to run the business, after the transaction. So that's how I got started selling businesses for other people. So
got it. And in that fund, did you guys, so I'm assuming is different the businesses. So it's almost like a mini conglomerate, if you will, multiple diverse. It's not all related to automotive. There's some automotive, there's some logistics, right?
Yeah. The logistics was, like a trucking business that delivered like high-end artwork, stuff of that nature across the country. So for example, someone here in Naples, Florida, that has an expensive art collection that lives on the beach, right? And they want to, and they're moving, to, they want stuff transported to their home in Michigan or New York or wherever. We would come white glove it, package it up, crate it, do whatever was required, for it to protect it, and then move it for them.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's just specific for art?
Well, art, pianos, things of that nature, mostly stuff that's high has a value to it.
Got it. And so did you end up selling that business?
Yeah, I ended up selling it. If you recall, we bought it right about the time the oil shock hit. So it was, it was right before that, and no one was expecting that. I think it was like 2008, 2009 oil shock.
Yeah.
And it was when the like fuel prices on the West Coast were like $1.71 for a gallon of diesel, and they went to like $5.41 overnight.
Wow.
And when you're in the transportation logistics field, what you do is you usually have people prepay you for, a fuel surcharge.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden our fuel costs tripled, and we were collecting a third of what we needed to move.
Yeah.
The goods. So I mean, there was some pretty hairy times. Especially at a time when that recession hit, people didn't have money and they stopped moving things and stopped doing things. So trying to catch up took what should have been maybe about a 2 or 3 month adjustment was probably about a 6 or 7 or 8 month adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
And what I ended up doing is, at the end of the day, I had, warehouses, kind of hubs. It was a hub and spoke model. So I had hubs in Charlotte, North Carolina, and in Liberal, Kansas. And the guy out of Liberal, Kansas, made me an offer for the business, and said, "Yeah."
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Those were tough times. And I mean, it's so, it was one of those unique moments in history where you see how things are correlated and how, one thing impacts and then the next thing there's all this secondary impact. And but everything around homes and everything around, art and decor, everything went down, all that,
everything.
All that segment. Everything. Like I remember even Starbucks was struggling during that period. And actually they had like 2 days where they shut down all their stores and then retrained everybody on how to do things, and then kind of almost like did a relaunch. And you wouldn't think like Starbucks, but it is a luxury, so it was impacted during a deep recession, which is fascinating. So after that, what did you do?
Well, when we started, when everybody left and I was the only one man left standing, I had hired some people to do some work for me. So, to smooth out that transition. But as we started selling off assets, for myself at that point, also started, exploring the idea of selling for other people. And, that concept I really liked because, like I said, I just enjoyed the game of, working on a deal, helping someone exit their business, helping someone, start that entrepreneurship journey. It was very satisfying, to get a deal done, and you sit there at the closing table, you got a happy seller, an excited buyer, and then, I would walk away with a nice check, and I wouldn't have the responsibility of ownership.
Yeah.
And the employees and everything else that goes along with it. So
Yeah.
I mean, it was a good transition for me.
Nice. So when you first started, like what kind of businesses did you focus on?
Well, I was in Southwest Florida, so almost everything here is service based.
Okay.
So a lot of the businesses were construction related. Once that sector kind of recovered a little bit. But it was hair salons, restaurants, AC companies, pest control, mostly things of that nature. Over time, as I had more deals, under my belt, and I had, confidence of, CPAs and other folks to refer me. Once I gained their trust, then, we started moving up market into more lower middle market stuff. So, my background, obviously in automotive, you would have thought that would have helped me, but I walk into any type of automotive business today and I say, well, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. And it's the craziest thing. Nobody wants to engage me to sell their automotive business. I don't know. It's like a fear of me knowing too much or what, but it's kind of a strange phenomenon because I would have thought that those would have been the businesses that are the easiest for me to engage a seller and get their signature on a bottom line to sell. But the other stuff, all those service businesses, done a lot of HVAC, done remodelers, construction industry, done pest, like I mentioned, pest control. But where I really have honed in on our medical and dental type businesses, things for, whether it's practices or, related. We've done medical software, we've done, medical distribution businesses and the like, had some significant success there. I think in our state association, I've had the 2 largest dental practice deals
Oh, nice.
patient history. So love dentists, and that probably comes from the fact that a lot of my good friends when I was growing up and my college roommates ended up being dentists. They were a demented bunch, but great friends even to this day. So glad
That's
to help
interesting. That's really interesting because I just went to the dentist yesterday, and he's a friend of mine. So we started talking about the business and how he's one of the few independent, dentists out there, and he's looking to grow and expand and in the industry as a whole, like, dentistry, let's say, said the dentistry has its own dynamic where we have private equity came and, rolled up a lot of these practices, and then the individual practice is having a hard time because they're competing on talent, they're competing on customers, on patients. What are your thoughts on that? And I'm assuming the private equity guys have kind of slowed down a little bit because there was a lot of breakage, around 21, 22, post 2020, 2021. There were a lot of them that were having digestive problems, trying to integrate these practices. But that was my view. What do you think, is happening right now in that space?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of view it as there's almost 3 layers.
Okay.
There's the large private equity backed folks like the Heartland Dental and things of that nature. And I think what's really happened in the market is that the market has discovered that the Heartland Dentals and those big players are more lowballers. They're going to come in with, pricing that's under market. Well, I don't want to say it's necessarily under market. It's at their market.
Yeah.
Which they think they can dictate because of their size, right? But there's kind of an underlying group of dental service organizations, some of them private equity backed, some of them family office backed, some of them, a myriad of, sources of money. And those seem to be paying a little bit more than like a Heartland Dental. One example is I had, one of those deals that I mentioned, that was one of the larger ones. It was a 4 clinician office in Fort Myers area. And we started with Heartland Dental, and Heartland Dental made that dentist an offer of $4.7 million for their practice.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, and the CPA brought me in and said, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "I think their $4.7 million is way under market."
And this is four locations.
No, 4 clinicians. So 1 location.
Oh, 1 location, 4 clinicians.
4 dentists.
Okay, got it. 4 dentists. Okay. How much was their revenue, EBITDA?
Revenue, I think, was between 6 and 7 million.
Okay.
And EBITDA was right around $1 million.
Okay, so they gave 4.7.
Yeah, so they were given about a 4.7x on it, and I said, I think we can get a lot more. And the one of the 2 principals, 2 dentists were principals. One of them was kind of like, "Well, let's just sign on the bottom line," and the other one was like, "I don't know, maybe we should see, what the market will bear." So we ended up getting them 7.4 million.
Wow.
And we got that from one of those kind of that mid-level group of DSO buyers that really, really wanted to be in the Southwest Florida market. They were very strong on the East Coast, and they had gotten into Tampa. They just didn't have, a presence in Southwest Florida. So once they purchased it, rebranded, I've noticed that they've opened up or have purchased, a few additional locations in Southwest Florida as well. So now they're starting to proliferate into it. But I see that level have, still being fairly active.
Okay. That middle level.
Yeah, the middle level. The more regional player, they're still, sweeping in and buying up offices.
And is the strategy for those guys to exit to a heartland or to IPO? What is the strategy for those guys? Because paying 7.5 on the 1 million, that's on the high side.
Well, I gotta believe, and I haven't talked to them about their strategies, because they aren't going to involve me in those deals, because they'll probably flip them to a hedge fund or something like that, right? So, in those deals, I'm guessing that they're looking at, a 10 to 12x, on, what, 25 million EBITDA, 50 million EBITDA, whatever that number might be that they're growing to.
Okay, nice. I mean, when you mentioned lowballing at 4.7x, I'm like, oh well, okay, that's not, it doesn't sound very lowball, but is that the price that you've seen, on the market? Like when people,
they're formula buyers, and what they offer 125%, of production or collection
of revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. And for like an individual who's buying, who wants to buy a practice like that, how would they position themselves to win?
An individual that wants to buy a practice, they would probably want to buy some of the smaller practices and buy into a practice with a dentist to give them their exit strategy. So when that dentist is ready to retire and leave, then they can transition that way. But just to buy someone out, right from the get-go for a young dentist, it's probably tough.
Okay, that makes sense. I
will say this. I mean, there's an interesting dynamic in the dentistry world that kind of mirrors itself throughout all the acquisition world, and that is, you have that, that Gen X, or what do you call it? Baby boomer generation right now that is very entrepreneurial, and they, from a dental standpoint, there's tons of baby boomer dentists out there, and you get into that group of 30 and 40 somethings and even the 50 somethings right now, and they love being employees. But the youngest generation now, the folks coming out of dental school, are flipping that. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to control their own destiny, and they're looking at, they seem much more aggressive in the buying end of
interesting.
The buyer pool. So you got a lot of younger, older people that are still buying.
Yeah,
even the older people are still buying. There's kind of that midsection. There's a lot. The percentages are significantly less of the entrepreneurial mindset than younger and older.
That's interesting. And are you seeing some of those individuals buying these smaller practices? Are you seeing activity there? Is there enough of it?
There's never enough, right?
Okay.
Especially with when you look at the baby boomer generation and the number of baby boomers that are of retirement age.
Yeah.
There's never enough buyers.
Oh, okay. And so what's stopping them from exiting? There's just not enough buyers. Is their business not big enough for private equity? Is that the reason why?
Yeah, you get a lot of smaller businesses that aren't big enough for private equity, that need someone that's hands-on. There's a lot of these baby boomer businesses where that baby boomer is the central figure in his business. So they know the operations, they know everything that's going on, they have their hands in on everything that's going on, and to some extent they've been very successful because of that. But they haven't, been able to take it to the next level, where they've been able to remove themselves from it. But I got to believe with the younger generation and, with the advent of AI and the ability to strategize using AI and take some things to that next level or scale things, with, a very detailed strategy and plan that, they can develop either themselves or, through the use of AI, further develop it.
Yeah.
I think right now, if you're young and you understand that stuff, I mean, it's a great buying opportunity for you.
100%. And but let me ask you this. There are a lot of practices, because we come across this, whether it is in dentistry or any other industry. There are a lot of practices that are owned by baby boomers that are the same way you mentioned, center of the business. They have their hands on everything. They may not have invested in the latest technology. They don't really have any marketing funnels. Most of the business is just word of mouth, and they've been working with the same families, and they get referrals all day. And also their assets, their equipment, their location has not been upgraded. Especially like you go to a dentist today,
Right.
they scan your mouth. They got this 3D model. They got this, they got all these, people that have big equipment with, they can do implants, within 5 minutes and so forth. So how do you evaluate that business with the baby boomer that may be high profitability because they do everything themselves and they don't have enough technology, they don't have enough staff, they don't have enough, and they've been around for a long time, but now they're transitioning to someone else who has to, invest and implement all the stuff, so how do you evaluate that business? How do you transition it? Because to me, that EBITDA is not real. And so how do you transition it?
Well, I guess beauty's in the eye of the buyer, right?
Yes.
And they gotta develop their business plan. When they look at a business that's maybe shy of a little bit of the technology that's needed to operate today, they just need to bake that into their costs of acquisition. But cash flow's king always, right? And if that impacts a little bit of your cash flow, because you have to come out of pocket $100,000 a year in debt for new equipment, whether it's a dental office or anything else, you just got to factor that in. So we always look at what's the capital requirements looking forward. What's that CapEx look like, over the next 5 years? To bring the business up to speed. And, if it's substantial, we just try to, let the buyer know that so they can factor that into their analysis.
Okay. And
generally I don't price too much for it. No. Just from the fact the matter is, I can't tell someone how they run their business.
Okay.
You don't know who that buyer is, because you also run into the case where, let's say it is a dental practice and it is a DSO, one of those mid-level buyers that are coming in, outside of equipment. If you just take a look at like processes and stuff, they may have all this, they're just plug and play and there's no investment needed.
Like shared services from accounting and marketing and so forth. That's interesting. So from all the practices that you've seen, describe one that's like at the top tier. What's the top tier dentistry practice? What does that look like? What is their margin, gross margin, net margin? What does that look like?
I've got one right now. It's just a single dentist, and he's doing $3.5–4 million a year, and he's putting about $1 million to the bottom line.
Nice.
And he's bought all the latest equipment and software and everything else, and he's 70 years old. So some of these guys, you think that aren't with it and on top of it are these older guys. A lot of them are.
A lot of them are. No, I agree. They're curious and they test things.
Absolutely. And then there's other ones that, they may have all this equipment that they've gone out and bought and, systems that they've gone and bought, but, they're doing, they're making $100,000 a year because, it's a lifestyle issue for them at this point, and they've made their money and they really don't care. So, it just runs the gamut of what you see.
So the 4 million one, was that like, did they have a marketing funnel? Were they, were they spending money on PPC, had like a person on the phone trained on converting leads, had good SEO, or was it just referral based business?
It was mostly referral based.
Okay. Which one is more valuable, the business that comes from insurance or the cash business?
Well, again, it just depends what drops to that bottom line, right?
So it doesn't matter.
I don't think it matters.
It doesn't matter. Okay. I've seen in some industries where they value the insurance business more than they value the cash business, just because they think it's more certain and more, guaranteed. But I don't think it is personally. But
well, there are costs associated with going and
yes,
getting that insurance money too.
Yes.
So there's pluses and minuses with it.
Yes, you have to have that billing department. You have to have that, that infrastructure. Correct. So in terms of like buyers, they don't really. So these private equity buyers, when they're going, what is their buy box? What does that look like? That the mid-tier group.
The mid-tier, what are they looking for?
Yeah.
They'll look at everything, because they're exhausted. So, most of them are going to do a QOE.
Yeah.
So they are going to comb through the financials, extensively. They are going to have their chief dental officer, right? Or if it's a medical practice, their chief medical officer come in and do a thorough review of the operations of the business, so they can, pick out any, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? They're going to go through that complete analysis on the operations. They're going to, divide everything up, into a little fine, they are detailed. So at the end of the day, those sales take time. They take a lot of effort on the seller's part. We try to organize it the best we can for them, but at the end of the day, they're like, wow, I can't believe how much work that was. But that buy box, what they're looking for is, they like multiple dentists, multiple clinicians, because, usually one wants to exit. So, I mentioned that one that's doing 4 million. It's a single clinician. That's a problem. So it's been a tough sell. But the ones with 4 clinicians in it, that was an easy sell. I had another one with 10 clinicians. That was an easy sell. So, they're just looking for, continuity of cash flow, with, let's say they're looking for, the synergies and opportunities, that their larger organization can implement, to generate even additional cash flow, in that business.
Okay. And so when you have like a deal with like multiple dentists, what does the deal structure look like? So for example, like the 7.5 one, what was that structure like? How much of it was cash? How much of it was earn out? How much of it need to be rolled into equity, rolled into the, like, I don't know if they roll into the individual branch or they roll into the larger entity. What does that look like?
Yeah, it was about 80% at closing, and then
80% cash at closing.
80% cash at closing on that one. And then what they did was there was like 20% what they did is they did it in 3-year installments for the owners, and those installments were paid out based on retention.
Okay.
So if they stayed in the business working, they not only received, their percentage of collections for doing the work, they received, that kind of additional earnout, but that earnout was 100% based on retention. So it had nothing to do with continuity of revenue or bottom. Just stay in the practice, make it look like nothing happened. While we changed the name eventually, so people think, hey, it's the same old, and then eventually when you're ready to leave permanently, we'll replace you.
So all 4 of them had to stay for 3 years.
Well, the 2 principals had to stay.
Okay.
The other 2, they were employees.
Oh, okay. So they're employees. Okay. So it doesn't really matter. Okay. So so essentially it's all based on retention, and then their goal is to replace these guys. Do they actually take in consideration if there's even room to have new dentists into that same practice?
Oh yeah, they did a thorough evaluation when they came in and looked at the operations. They looked at the number of operatories. They looked at, for any other free space that was available. There's space upstairs for a lab, for example, so they could bring in their own, lab tech. if they wanted to. So they looked at everything with in incredible detail.
Yeah.
Look at see, can we expand this to 5, 6, dentists?
Okay. Okay. So that's their goal. That's interesting. So how long has it been now since the exit?
That one we did. I think it was about 3.5 years ago.
Okay. So did the dentist leave, or they're still there?
They're still there.
They're still there. Okay.
Yeah.
All of them?
Yeah. I think one of them left in the first year, one of the employees.
Okay.
But he was someone who really wanted to have his own practice anyways.
Okay.
And, that was divulged right up front. So there was no surprise. So, right after acquisition, they started, looking for a replacement for him.
Nice. And were the sellers happy with the experience?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
even still working there, which is, surprised me.
Yeah.
And every time I talk to him, because that 20% was on earnout, I had to wait for that money.
You too. As a broker, you have to wait for it too.
On an earnout, yeah.
Oh wow.
But the great thing was I never had to contact them. They always contacted me and said, "Hey, we owe you some money."
Oh, that's
send
cool.
you the check. Which
That's
was great.
nice.
I didn't have to, call
That's
them.
nice. And so do you have any idea what their process was post acquisition?
I didn't get too involved in it.
Got
But I know they had their IT person. They have their team. Their team kind of rushes in, and converts everything over,
Nice.
to kind of their processes and systems. So I talked to him while that was going on.
Yeah.
But we were talking more about other little issues, more with the lease because the sellers own the building and still own the building.
Okay.
But the, most of that discussion went like, yeah, everything's going fine. We're not having any problems. They're the owners now.
That's great. So you talked about the structure of 80/20. Have you seen any other structures that were like interesting, creative?
No, I had that other large dental deal with the 10 clinicians was very similar. But it was one owner, and he had to stay on for 1 year because he was a bit older. And they were fine with it, and his final payout was predicated on first year's revenue.
Oh, okay. So it was more an earnout on that first year revenue. And what was the revenue on that one?
That one was right around, I think, 7.5 million.
Okay.
Yes, between 7.5 and 8 million.
Okay. And the EBITDA margin?
Yeah, he was right in there too, right around 1 million.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So the prices are too far apart on those.
The price also the same?
Similar. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, within a few $100,000 of each other.
Okay. So these are usually doing like about 15% EBITDA. Is that normal in the dentistry space?
It's actually, it just depends. I mean, I've seen much better and much worse.
Okay.
A lot of it really depends on size, right? Because if you're, and the agreements you have with your supply sources, because you can get those volume discounts, and some sellers did I've got the 10 clinician one did a better job of negotiating those discounts than the 4 clinician one. So you would have thought, one location. You think about it, one location, similar revenue.
Yeah.
But you would think that the margin on the one location one would be better than the one that had 10 locations, or not 10, but 6 locations. Not true, because the 6 location operation did a much better job negotiating material costs and lab costs.
That's interesting. But the other side that I'm surprised by is that four dentist location had the same revenue as a 10 dentists. So these guys were a lot more productive than these guys, twice as much or 2.5 times as much with the same revenue. Why is that? Do you know?
More than likely it's because, locations. I
Okay.
mean, if you look at the, the floor clinician office, I mean, it's right in the heart of Fort Myers. So it had, from a number of
Population
perspective of
density.
patients, they're right there. And they did a lot more marketing.
Okay. So to spend more marketing on, okay. So when you think about like a productivity per dentist, if you have a practice of 10, then you would expect, about $1.5 million. Have you seen anybody that's doing like 2 million, 3 million per dentist?
Oh yeah.
Oh, so there are out there. So what is the most you've seen?
Yeah, it's the
per
one
dentist?
I mentioned that was, he's a single clinician, this office is in New Jersey.
Oh,
But
single
he does-
operation, and he does 4.5
Yeah,
million?
Yeah, he's doing like 4 million.
4 million. Okay.
But he's got a large staff. So
Okay.
he's got, a fair number of hygienists, and he's got a fair number of, if you look at the number of hygienists to clinician and dental assistants to clinician, he's got a high number
Okay.
compared to.
Okay.
So a lot of that throughput, is, doing cleanings and similar
Yeah.
things like that,
And
low end stuff.
and
And
his,
he just jumps in and does the high end stuff.
makes sense. And his margin, is that better than the other guys?
His margin is better.
Better.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Well, when you're only paying one dentist, your
Yes.
margin will be better.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay. That's fascinating because, a lot of the, dentistry mirrors a lot of other industries. It's not like, the only exception is when you deal with, mental health care or some kind of like therapy care or some kind of in-home care where you deal with the insurance and most of the, you're dealing with the state. Have you dealt with those types of businesses?
Yeah, I have. Sometimes they're tough to sell just because of regulatory changes and
Yes.
insurance changes and everything else going on. I know I had one in Ohio not too long ago, behavioral health, and they wanted to sell to one of the local competitors, and they brought me in to help facilitate that. But it was you go to some of these deals that I've got, where you had the two dentists and they weren't aligned, but they were reasonable to work with.
Yeah.
And I could get them aligned.
Yeah.
Behavioral health and in the medical field, when you have multiple owners, they are much more difficult to get aligned.
Really? Like,
Oh
what's the difference?
I don't know. I mean, I've just found that, there's like competitive jealousies and things of that nature. The dynamics in a medical practice are totally different than a dental practice. Dentists just seem to be a little bit more laid back.
Yeah.
And easier to work with, but medical professionals, I think they're just a little bit, I don't know if it's the egos that get in the way or what have you, but I mean, they are, and it's not that they're nasty to me, they're nasty to each other.
Oh, wow.
And
And is this like a owners partners, or is it like the other doctors or the other practitioners?
it's the other doctor owners.
Yeah.
Practitioner owners. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
I own 37%, but I've done a lot more work than the other two, to build this business. So I deserve, 45%.
Oh, they're arguing over who's going to get what post during that process. Wow.
And I don't want to take on an engagement until that's been decided, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I could have gotten them a deal, but they just fought over every little penny.
Wow.
And, they could never pull the trigger because each of them wanted more than what their share was. And I'm like, can't we just, you own 37.5%, you own this, can't we just agree that that's, after the cost of sale, that's what you take? And it's like, absolutely not.
Wow, that's interesting, because in the beginning, when you start the process, you ask them for, the equity table, who gets what and who owns what, and you get the operating agreement, you get the the corporate docs, you get everything, but it doesn't matter, post once, and this is not something that came up early. This came later once you got the offer.
Sure. Yeah.
Wow, that's
And
fascinating.
I did other medical practices, which was a single doctor, or there was a single doctor who owned it and had multiple doctors underneath them. Very easy to work with.
Nice.
But when they all have a share, it's a different dynamic. And my one lesson learned is you got to sort that out right up front.
Early. That's good. So from a retention practice, what are some of the best practices that owners of these medical or dental practices do to retain their employee dentists or doctors, whatever? What are some of the best practices? Do you tell them early on that, hey, we're thinking about selling, blah blah blah, or you wait until last minute and you just tell them that, hey, we sold, we're ready to close? And what else? What other things do they do to keep that retention high?
My recommendation always to keep retention high is that you don't tell your employees at all until the day of the sale. And the reason being is I always look at it as employees would rather work for the devil they know than the devil they don't know.
Yes.
And if you think about it, you're a dentist and you're working for someone in Fort Myers. You've probably had 5 or 6 firms at a minimum, in the last 4 or 5 months reach out to you because everybody needs dentists, saying, hey, are you looking to move?
Yeah.
And, all of them are probably having conversations around those lines saying, yeah, I might be interested, where would I be moving? And they may they may know that dentist. They may know, be comfortable with that dentist, and they may not know the person that you're bringing in as the buyer, and they may not be willing to give them a chance if they know in advance that you're selling.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen where, we have to talk to your staff in advance, and it's got to be, 3 weeks in advance or whatever, a month in advance of the sale. And the sale happens and 2-week notices come in.
Wow.
And they've never given you a chance. And I keep telling people that's what you got to worry about, especially in any industry where your employees are in high demand.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's another thing. Is like, what if those employees are already unhappy in that place and they were already interviewing in other places? Then from a buyer perspective, how do you kind of validate or due diligence that part? If you take the other side.
Well, you never know, right?
Okay.
Because nobody's going to tell you, and I'm not talking to the employees.
Got it.
I'm avoiding the employees because
you're right.
them to know.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, the way I look at it, if you put yourself in the employee's shoes, and you're unhappy with the present owner, you don't feel he's treating you well, and you come in tomorrow and there's a new owner, and the new owner says, hey, everybody, blah 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 blah, I'm the new owner, and it's probably more of a breath of fresh air for that employee. It's like, okay, I get to start my relationship from scratch with this new buyer, and maybe I should give him a chance.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
And then there's other aspects that you can do, as a new buyer too. You can say, okay, there's retention bonuses, or as a sellers oftentimes will put in retention bonuses, just to sweeten the pot on the deal. They tell the seller, if, I'm giving, my top, 4 key employees a $10,000 bonus if they stay 6 months out of what I put in my pocket.
Makes sense.
Right. And, I've had lots of sellers do that just as thank yous to their employees for, making sure the transition goes well.
Okay, that makes sense. In this medical space, there's a lot of risk of litigation, a lot of risk of, dentistry, one, but then the other elements, there's a lot more billing nonsense happening, a lot of shenanigans happening.
Yeah, we loved it.
Yeah. So give us an example, and then how do you think? Give us an example of situation, and then how do you think a buyer can avoid those situations? Especially on the billing side, because we had an example in our community where it was a really nasty, terrible situation. So give me your example, and then give me like what do you think a buyer should do to alleviate for that risk?
Well, I'll jump to the second question first,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
the billing stuff's more personal. But on a to protect yourself from past litigation, obviously the easiest way to do it is just an asset sale.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're doing an asset sale in a medical practice and you don't have the insurance relationships, that can be a problem.
Right.
Right. So that's always a hurdle, and it creates, some form of decision making, on the part of the buyer. So let's say you decide you need that insurance, those insurance relationships. So you want to do a stock transaction, and you do that stock transaction, you're going to want your attorney to put in all the appropriate indemnifications for any past, issues that were related to that business. And, there's also a nice little thing called tail insurance that you can force on, a seller to purchase, just to make sure that if there is something that comes up, in the future, past the date of sale, and you're drug into some type of lawsuit, that, there's an insurance policy in there to make sure that you're not held liable for something that someone else did.
Okay, that makes sense. How about the billing side?
Billing side and billing errors. I mean, it's amazing the stuff that's going on right now. And if you're not checking your billing and your billing codes,
Yeah,
do it, because I can tell you stories from family members that are just unbelievable on how hospital systems are taking and putting in billing codes that generate 10 times the revenue, 10 times more revenue than what they've earned or deserve.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying attention to that, you're losing that money. Because a lot of times,
are there any people that are in this due diligence space, like consultants that understand billing codes, that can go into, as part of the due diligence process, can go into a practice and then just review all the codes and come back and tell you what it is, what's real and what's not?
I'm looking for anybody that can understand any of the billing codes. When you find one, that'll be the first person I've ever.
Okay, so that might be a good service to create.
And the people actually filling out those codes, for some of these hospitals and stuff. I mean, I'm certain, they will have amnesia when it comes to.
Yeah, they themselves don't understand. One of the situations we had, it was like a really terrible situation. It was a buyer bought a practice, a mental health, provider practice, and the seller was coding things, in a way to obviously increase the revenue per patient, but also was paying the practitioners based on that revenue. So when the practitioner came in, now there's this fraud. And when he found that fraud, he had to, and I think he even had like notices from someone from the government, from the state. And then, so he had to kind of clean that up. So by cleaning it up, the revenue per patient went down. Now the practitioner is not happy, because now their income is going to be affected. So therefore you end up losing the practitioners, because that's what the business is.
Right.
It was such a gnarly situation. I didn't really, I didn't know that much about the space and about the industry, but it was like fascinating to see. And it was lucky it was like heavy seller financing. So it was like 80% seller financing, or like very heavy seller finance. So it was able to kind of claw back some of the things, but still the business technically is like bust. And then he has to put in a lot more effort to hire new practitioners and then essentially rebuild that business.
Yeah. Well, that's the world of behavioral health.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So what spaces have you seen like that behavioral health? What, is there any other places in the healthcare system that has kind of like those that risk or those shenanigans? Or like,
Well, I think it can happen anywhere.
Okay.
Just because they made the coding so complex with the Affordable Care Act, it had just opened the door wide open for potential fraud.
Okay.
And there are people, that will take advantage of that, and there's others that, play by the book. Unfortunately, I think there is a lot more who will play unfair than they'll play fair out there right now.
Well, from a competitive standpoint, it's kind of pushes everybody. So if your competitor is, playing unfairly, then those are the new rules now. And then for you to compete, if they have more revenue, they're going to have more marketing. If they have more marketing, they're going to attract more customers. So for you to compete, you have to you have to play in this gray-ish, zone. And then now everybody's impacted in a spectrum, if you will. Some are way worse than others, but so I'm assuming you can probably see it when you look at the margins. If the margin looks way higher than normal, then that's probably something that you have to dig into. But the challenge you're saying is that, there aren't that many people out there that can actually like analyze this and tell you what's real and what's not.
No, but the person that develops an AI tool, to do that,
That's true.
Will probably be a hero.
That's true. That is a good idea. So yeah, we need to find it. I don't think it'd be that difficult if you have the database. You're just matching. So. Yeah, you're just matching. That's interesting.
The problem is HIPAA.
Yes. Yeah, access to that data. That's interesting. Okay, so I know we're at the end of it. So what do you what is your process? So when you get a new client, like a new client to help them exit, what is your process like? When you first talk to them all the way through the exit.
Yeah, I've got a little bit different process than most brokers. You'll see a lot of them in Florida that just are in a rush to get that listing out there and to the market. But I'm one who looks at it that proper preparation, results in success.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'd be much happier to sell your dental practice or whatever it is for 7.4 million than rush it to market and get 4.7.
Yeah.
So, my process is this, we do an opinion of value right up front. I have certified appraisers on board too, but generally an opinion of value is all anyone needs. It's very similar.
Yeah.
In scope, and the results are often very, very close. And if we agree on value and price, the next step is an engagement letter. The next step after that is a seller questionnaire. I have an incredibly thorough seller questionnaire, and I will take my time and the seller's time in order to make sure that that's filled out thoroughly. I generally, on the larger deals, will ask the seller to do a 15-minute to 25-minute Zoom interview with me, where I'll ask the questions that a typical buyer will ask. And what I've found, and I haven't mentioned this, I do a lot of engineering companies too as an engineer.
Oh, nice. But
the one thing that I've found that has accomplished is when you give someone a lot of the data up front, they're going to make their yes/no decision really quickly, and you'll get a lot more no's up front. Yeah. Which is great, because going to the next step, you'll have fewer people go to the next step.
Yes.
Which is a buyer-seller meeting. And what I've found that with the detailed SIM or CBR, or whatever you want to call it, with that detailed information and the seller interview, I've done 20 some meetings with the seller of my engineering firm and buyers. The first one I did before I had that interview went for an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow.
Since then, the longest one I've had is 25 minutes.
Nice.
So when you look at, that, half hour to 45 minutes that's given back to me and the seller, 20 times over for that extra hour I spent with them, doing an interview, on a Zoom call like this, and that extra hour I spent with them, going through a detailed seller questionnaire to build, a very detailed, confidential information memorandum. I mean, it's paid itself back, 10 times over already.
It makes sense. Yeah, it makes complete sense. What are those typical questions that get asked?
Well, it's there's the basic stuff, right?
Sure.
Like, let's just take, your customers.
Yeah.
Right. So what I want to tell everybody right up front, kind of who the customer types are, what the revenue breakdown is of those customer types.
Mm-hmm.
Who are your, top customers? Is there any customer concentration,
Yeah.
In your revenue numbers?
Yeah.
If there are, you want to address that up front, because you don't want to say, oh, I've got a $10 million business, I'm listing for $10 million. And, oh, by the way, one customer is 80% of the revenue, because then someone's going to look at it and go, you want how much?
Yeah.
There's so much risk here.
Yeah.
So you don't want to set, unrealistic expectations from the seller or the buyer. So that information is very important. You want to ask about, I want to ask about, are there any new customers or new projects or anything coming up, in the near future that it's going to increase revenue?
Yeah.
Are there any customers that you've recently lost that's going to result in decreased revenue? What's your loyalty, your repeatability, on your customer base, et cetera, et cetera. So if you answer all those questions up front, you don't have and you put them in that information in a confidential business review.
Yeah.
You're not really spending a whole lot of time talking about customers.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And it just cascades down to everything else too: products, services, marketing, marketing process, everything. So if you ask the right questions up front, put the right detail into that confidential information memorandum, you're going to spend a lot less time, on the phone calls and Zoom meetings with buyers and sellers.
It makes a lot of sense. What are the last question, what is the type of buyers, or what is the behavior of a buyer that you feel good about, that gives you a sense, okay, this is a serious buyer, this is someone who's considerate and as opposed to a tire kicker?
Yeah, I mean, you look for someone that's prepared.
Okay.
And what does that mean, right? So to me, that means someone that can verify their financial viability quickly. And I don't need to know if they have a $34 million trust fund, although
Sure.
I'd like it.
Yeah.
I just need something to the extent of either a financial statement, a letter from your banker, a letter from your CPA, something to that effect, that says, hey, here's the liquidity that they have and the size of the deal that they can do.
Okay.
Right. Someone that has, a resume, a CV, something to that effect, that just tells me who they are, what they've done. Even a LinkedIn profile is sufficient.
Okay.
Right? Because that has most of the information that I can look at and go, okay, I understand your skills, your background, your experience, and how it relates. Because if I have to get a seller approval to disclose, they're going to want to know who I'm working with.
Yeah.
And I would say, the last thing is, have it all prepared in a nice little package with kind of your wants and needs, laid out in that too. The buyer that tells me I know what I want when I see it, that's great. There's, 45,000 businesses for sale at any given time in the United States. So, that are on like a BizBuySell or a BizQuest or, or any other listing sites. So how am I you want me to sort through 45,000 listings?
Yeah.
When am I going to sleep?
So that you're saying this in the context where they're not inquiring about a specific business, but they're just reaching out to you to telling you, hey, I'm a buyer, I'd like to work. Okay, got it. Makes sense.
And if they are reaching out for a specific type of business, they should have all that pulled together as well.
Anyway,
because that helps the broker wants to know who they're working with, and they've got the money because, I'll go back to the days when I when I started and I was doing more restaurants, and there was a few bars, mixed in there, which, now if it's a waterfront restaurant that's doing $4 million, I'll take it,
Yes.
If it's, if it's,
Pizzeria.
I actually have one for a good friend of mine who I've done deals with him in the past. And, he's got like it's a hamburger place, right? And, it's a small deal, but I'll take it just because he's a friend of mine and I've done deals with him in the past. So I'm not going to leave him hanging with someone else.
Yeah.
But those, when you're chasing something, big, you better, present yourself professionally, because you're competing against a bunch of other buyers.
Makes sense.
And I don't want to waste my time. But, going back to those bar days, the number of people sitting on a dock with a 6-pack, in northern Michigan, going, I'd like to own a bar in Florida, is, they're looking, call this guy. And, they don't have a dime to their name. They just spend it on that 6-pack.
Yeah.
No capability of, there's a lot more than people realize.
True.
So if you come forward prepared and, have a professional package put together, you're going to get taken seriously. If I think that, it sounds like a guy's talking, to me from a dock in northern Michigan, I'm going to go, I don't think he's serious.
Nice. That makes sense. Well, I appreciate you joining us, Eric. There's a lot of really great insights, a lot of really good info. So thank you.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Glad to come on, Jay.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right. You too.